Hi everyone. Welcome to day 2 of Hammurabi's Code. I told you yesterday how excited I was. Well, this is Tuesday, so I told you on Friday how excited I was to start working in the on this topic of Hammurabi's Code, and really that was just the intro day, and this is where we really get into that nitty-gritty of what it's all about. So let's get right to it. So first, we'll talk about how Hammurabi's Code was used, how it was intended to be used by Hammurabi himself. So the code was used it's written as a guide for the judges in Sumer to understand and to use it, to understand how to determine guilt in a court situation, and for how to determine what the punishment should be that they give the guilty party, if there is a guilty party. Now, some of it's a little weird. They'll say, if somebody commits a crime and they're accused of that crime, but there's no evidence, then we're going to throw them in the Tigris or the Euphrates River, and if they drown, then that means the gods knew that they were guilty and didn't save them, and if they don't drown and they get out safely and they're not injured, then that means that they were not guilty, and then the person that accused them must have lied. So that's where it gets a little weird. But Hammurabi's Code is used as generally a guide, the way it reads, and we'll read some of it right now and a little bit more during this presentation. So again, remember, it's really like a guide for that the monarch, our king Hammurabi, gives the judges in Sumer, so they can understand how to determine who wins and loses a lawsuit, or who's guilty and not guilty, and then what consequence or punishment to give. So the code is very if-then, like a math equation, like if this happens, then this will happen. So if a man, here's an example, if a man put out the eye of another man, then his eye shall be put out. It's very if this happens, then this is the consequence. If this happens, then this is how you should punish this person. And that's really, it's 282, as you know, laws, but it's been simplified. It's very simple. If this is the situation, then this is how you deal with that situation. So it really does read as to a judge like, hey, if you have a case and this person's accused of this, if this is what they're accused of, then this is how you determine who's guilty, and this is then how you punish them. And so literally I use this example here. If a man put out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. That's why historians refer to Hammurabi's Code as an eye for an eye. It's often referred to this way, specifically because of that example in that law that I just gave you, one of 282 of them. But it's also referred to as an eye for an eye and as a tooth for a tooth. And this just pretty much means whoever commits an injury should be punished in the same manner as that injury was caused in. So if someone breaks a man's bone by dropping a boulder on his leg, then the man that dropped that boulder and injured that man and broke his bone in the leg should be held down, and someone should take a boulder and drop it on their leg to break the bone that way. It is very much, you did this, you will legitimately be punished the exact same way. It's also sort of like the golden rule. Treat others as you want to be treated. It's really interesting that that's how it reads. This means that whoever commits an injury or a crime to somebody, they should be punished the exact same way, in the exact same manner as they caused the injury or committed the crime. Here are a few more examples that we'll read through. We're not going to do all 282, of course. So examples of these laws are: a surgeon who causes the death of a patient must have his hand cut off. Now you might be saying, shouldn't they be killed? Well, that surgeon's hand caused the death because they had the knife or the scalpel in that hand. So then that hand is really the guilty party here of the surgeon, and the hand is their livelihood. So this is almost, a surgeon's pretty high up on the social pyramid and in the social hierarchy of ancient Sumer. And really this is almost like giving them a death sentence, because now they can't, you can't go through with more surgeries. You can't perform more surgeries. So you're right away you're losing your livelihood, and that could be like a death sentence. Another one is a man may sell his wife or children into slavery to pay a debt. And I almost laugh at this because this is clearly an ancient law that values women and children much less than they should be valued. And so it's almost an awful law. And that's because paying off a debt is important. And I also want to point out that men, women, and children are treated differently. This says it says a man may sell his wife and children. And that's why what we need to infer here when we infer things are women and children were property of men in the ancient world. Another one, anyone who gets into a fight with someone and breaks any bones must pay that person one, it's kind of like $1, like mina, of silver. So again, if you hurt somebody in a certain manner and it's somebody of a lower class, then you are allowed to just pay that for the injury that you caused. But all of these things are examples in Hammurabi's world in Babylon, in ancient Sumer, the city-state of Babylon that he ruled for 42 years. It's all examples of holding people accountable. Okay? So we'll move on here. These laws were not always fair, as I just showed you. We just talked about a few that were harsh, but not necessarily fair. When it came to Hammurabi's code, please pay attention here. Your social class mattered. It mattered if you were higher or lower on that social pyramid. If someone injured a wealthy or a rich man, it brought a greater penalty or punishment than injuring a poor man or a slave in the same way. It mattered if you were considered important and valuable in society, or if you were not considered important and valuable in the social hierarchy of Sumer. So the social hierarchy is really important to Hammurabi's code because Hammurabi did not view the social classes on that pyramid as equal. And this means that punishments were adjusted based on where you were on that social pyramid. If you were higher on the social pyramid, then you were given a lesser penalty for committing a crime, and if a crime was committed against you, a harsher penalty was applied to the person if they came from a lower part of the social pyramid. It's very interesting. Hammurabi placed a lot of emphasis on your social hierarchy, and you were punished more harshly or less harshly based on that. So as we continue, here are some examples. Not all examples of Hammurabi's code ended in the penalty of death, in the death penalty. But of those 282, I have selected just 3 for us to examine today. We will examine several more tomorrow and give you a chance to have some creative power. So number 6 of Hammurabi's code, if anyone steal the property of a temple or of the court, he shall be put to death. And also the one who receives the stolen thing from him shall be put to death. And so this means if you steal something from the temple or the court, it's a death sentence for you. Really, stealing was close to a death sentence at all times. But they're telling you, not always though, and they're telling you that if you steal from the temple, so from the religion, from the religious, from the priests, from the gods themselves, or from the court, which is the royal court of Hammurabi himself, it's an instant death penalty. But if someone steals something from that, from the temple or the court, Hammurabi's royal court, and then they give it and sell it or give it to somebody else, then that person that receives it will also be put to death. And that is important to note. This one is wild. Number 25. If fire break out in a house, and someone who comes to put it out cast his eye, which means looks upon the property of the owner of the house, and take the property of the master of the house, he shall be thrown into that self-same fire. What that really means is, if you go and help somebody put a fire out in their home, and then you notice that they have valuables, and then you go back or you steal something at that time, then they will throw you in that fire. And it sounds a little wild, but you have to understand that if they took the time, if scribes took the time to write out in cuneiform on clay tablets with a stylus, which now we're using a bunch of our vocab words, a lot of our vocabulary, if they're taking the time to do that, it means that this must have happened. Somebody must have at least one time gone and helped someone put a fire out and stolen something in the process, or gone back afterwards. And they decided that the best way to deal with that was to throw them into a fire and give them a death penalty that way. Harsh? Yes. Fair? Maybe. It's up to you guys to decide that, which you'll do in a little while. Not all laws ended in the penalty of death, however. Some laws protected property. So this is a pretty cool one, actually. Number 27 of Hammurabi's Code. If a chieftain or man, which really means like a warrior, be caught in the misfortune of the king, which means captured in battle, and if his fields, his property really, his fields and garden be given to another, which means another man, and he take possession of it, if the man that was caught or captured in battle return and reaches his place, his field and garden shall be returned to him. He shall take it over again. This is an insurance policy 3,800 years ago. And you had better believe it's because you are in the service of the king. You're fighting a battle for the king. You're doing your civic duty. You're putting your life on the line. If you are captured and later on you return, and they have given your home and your property to someone else, you will get that property back. It doesn't say if you were enslaved because you owed a debt, you would get it back later. It really has emphasis on the fact that you are in the service of the king. You are fighting for the city-state. You are fighting for the king himself. You will then be given your property back if you return. It's a pretty cool way to look at an insurance policy. And this is interestingly the basis of several laws in modern countries today. So to review Hammurabi's Code, what we've learned today, it was used as a guide for judges in Sumer. It was very if-then. If you did this, this is how you're punished. It's referred to by historians as an eye for an eye, because oftentimes it means that whoever commits the injury will be punished the exact same way. And this is the really our biggest takeaway is it was not always fair. Your social class depended on how you were punished, and even if you were punished. Some people were, if you injure a rich man, you could be put to death. But if you injure a slave or a poor man the same way, then you can just pay a fine. It really means that the life of a wealthier person higher on the social hierarchy and the social pyramid was more valuable in ancient Sumer by law than it was if you were a lower social pyramid person. And this also means that the amount of wealth and power you have determines how you're treated in this society.